Hello, everybody, and welcome to Climate Emergency Forum. We're filming this from Baku, Azerbaijan on Saturday, November 16th. So we're working on Saturday. We're working hard. And I have the pleasure to have a chat here with Herb Simmens, who's you may know as being an author of a book on climate vocabulary, and I'm going to get him to introduce himself briefly and maybe just talk about his book just for a few minutes, and then we'll go into the hard and deep questions on why we're here, why he's here, and what we hope to achieve from the COP.
Thank you, Paul. It's really a pleasure to be here with you and with everyone else in Baku, which is, I don't know if you've found this so far, but I find it an extraordinary city, vital and intense, with poverty and wealth and everything in between, and lots of oil fumes as its history as the premier oil center of the world many decades ago. And of course, that's one of the ironies of being here at COP, that we're surrounded by oil money and oil power, as we're all attempting as best as we can to figure out how to phase out oil and gas and other fossil fuels. And I'm here, I guess, wearing a couple of hats. Yes, as you mentioned, I am an author of a book called A Climate Vocabulary of the Future. And I wrote the first edition in 2017 and the last edition last year, or the second edition, because I saw that, because it may be a cliche now, but it wasn't as much years ago, I saw that essentially climate affects and is affected by everything. And just when something new and sweeping comes about, we usually wait for a lag time before the new vocabulary sort of fits in and catches up. So I thought I would take a kind of head start by basically both curating several hundred existing terms, but also making up a couple hundred new terms, which I had a lot of fun to do, and perhaps I can talk about those or not later on in our interview. So that's one of the reasons I'm here, is to sort of talk about vocabulary and how we speak in the coming years about climate. And I'm also a co-founder of an international group called the Healthy Planet Action Coalition, HPAC, 4 words, each of which is a generic word: Healthy Planet Action and Coalition. But when you put them all together, our goal is a very bold one, and it's one that's outside of the conventional discussions here at COP, at least largely outside, unfortunately, and that is we would actually propose and believe it's possible not just to limit temperatures to 1.5 or 2 or higher, as is likely under our present course, but to reduce temperatures through a combination of what you call the three-legged stool, what we call the Climate Triad: accelerated and aggressive emission reductions, large-scale carbon removal, and most urgently and most controversially, what we call direct climate cooling. Some people call it solar geoengineering, solar radiation management, sunshine reflection. And we think that there are approaches and techniques, and you've covered many of them in all of your videos over the years, that have great promise, but they're being held back because of all sorts of fears and concerns that we think are mostly unfounded. So part of my mission here is to try to get the word out about cooling as a means of restoring a safe climate.
Well, interestingly enough, I just attended a session where Stefan Ramsdorf zoomed in from his location, and he gave a 15-minute talk on the AMOC, the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. And he said a few years ago he thought that the risk of the AMOC shutting down, collapsing, he would have put it at about 5%. But he said now, today, with the new data and new information, he would say it's about 50%. And this is fairly soon. So I, of course, asked, it was a great opportunity. I asked him multiple questions, and I asked him one question. I said, I know how to stop the AMOC collapse. We just need to inject sulfur aerosols into the stratosphere over the Arctic, and that will shut it off. And he said, well, I don't think we've got studies on that. And I said one word: volcano. right? So it's interesting. But the ramifications of an AMOC collapse, for example, are huge. So, do you, your group, I mean, tell us more about how you're trying to, are you trying to get communication to people about these methods of the triad, which you call the triad, or are you advocating for specific methods of in particular, or because there is a lot of stuff at this COP on carbon dioxide removal, also on solar radiation management. It's becoming almost mainstream, not quite there yet.
Well, that's an important question. First, I have to say I had hoped to join you at that session, but one of the realities of traveling a long distance to a strange city is you sometimes, at least I do, take the wrong bus and wind up outside of Wi-Fi or cell phone service. And so I just got here in time for the interview, and I'm sorry I missed it. Notwithstanding that, very good question. I mean, what we're doing at HPAC is, number one, we believe that we have to think about setting a new goal, a much more ambitious goal. That's the first step. If you can get people to realize we don't have to be stuck with a goal that basically right now it could be paraphrased. In fact, you see many publications use this phrasing about avoiding the worst. If we aggressively do this and that, it won't be as bad as it otherwise could be. Well, we don't think that's either very inspirational or will get us out of trouble, whether it's our ecosystem collapse, humanity's migration in the millions and tens of millions of people, and all the other horrors that we don't need to go into right now. So then the question is, how do you do that? Well, we specifically, in answer to your question, do not take a position on any particular technique, whether it's for carbon dioxide removal or if it's for solar radiation management. We're sort of agnostic. I call it militantly agnostic. Our goal is really to say, world community, through this venue right here happening, a few feet away from us, through the IPCC, through the UN, other organizations, needs to put solar radiation management, along with the other two legs, at the forefront and objectively, urgently, and comprehensively evaluate all the techniques. And my guess is, because no government up until now has encouraged the development of these techniques or put money in towards it, it's slightly beginning to change in the last year or two. There are probably a whole lot of techniques or variations on techniques that are yet to be proposed because people aren't being asked to come up with ideas. For example, in carbon dioxide removal, now that money is available for carbon dioxide, you're seeing all sorts of new companies and initiatives because they see, there's some demand for it. And we think the same thing will happen with solar radiation management. So let me stop there and turn it back to you.
Yeah, so we need this triad or three-legged stool, and I feel like right now we're just like on a pogo stick, basically. And that's to cut emissions, but we're not doing that. Emissions are accelerating at ever greater rates. So I heard a little bird told me that you got to spend some time with Al Gore just yesterday. So there was an off-site event with Al, and you were lucky enough to pigeonhole him and ask him some questions and so on. So what was your impression? Do you think it's possible to sway him to come on board? I think as extreme weather events worsen around the planet, and we get the global food supply is threatened in the near term, like 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, but it's threatened from all of these extreme weather events. So I think it's just a matter of time before people sort of come on board with some of these ideas that we're discussing. And the sooner the better, but, given human nature, we'll probably need global food shortages to really get serious and say, yeah, we are in a climate emergency. Well, we've said that, but we're not acting like we are. So tell us about Al Gore and, your session with him, with the climate reality, right?
Well, I was invited to a reception for his members of his Climate Reality Project, which is a group of thousands of people who've taken a 3-day training that he's offered all over the world. And interestingly, I took the training some years ago, and I took it in your country, in Toronto, in a big convention center on the outskirts of Toronto, and in a kind of an industrial area where we sat for 3 days, about 300 or 500 of us or so, listening to Al Gore. And so I went to this reception yesterday, and basically what I wanted to ask him, and did have a chance to ask him, is I was aware, having read and done my homework in advance, that he has made some very critical and negative comments about solar geoengineering. So I started by saying I am aware that you're not a big fan of solar geoengineering, and I'm also aware that, but I'd like to ask you whether we're at the point or near the point where we're going to need it. And I wanted to make it very clear, one of the fears that exists is that people will see it as a substitute for emission reductions. So I made it very clear that it's in addition to, it's one of the three legs, it's not the leg. And he sort of, when I was standing there, maybe 2 feet from him or so, with my 30 seconds or minute before the next person had the opportunity, and he basically looked at me, and I had the feeling that he was like thinking to his bodyguard, like, who let this guy in? Which is actually, excuse me, Paul, if I do this, but it reminds me of when I attended a talk on climate by Tony Blair in Washington some years ago, and I had a copy of my book, and I went up to him afterwards, and I went to give him my book. I shoved myself through his bodyguards, and he gave me one of these, who the hell is this guy giving me his book? But he took a copy. But anyway, sorry for the digression. I'm just basically dropping names now, Tony Blair and Al Gore. But basically, he gave me a very stern look, and he said, no, I'm against it because of what he calls, and many people call, the moral hazard, meaning that if we allow this or encourage this, that people will take the pressure off the gas pedal, if you will, and won't be as aggressive on emission reductions. And I said, well, don't we really need to do both now? And it was clear that he really was finished with this conversation, and he said, I respect your views. So anyway, that was the story, and not that I expected to change his mind, but I think I just want to say one more thing. Of all the reasons he gave against it, in my own view, and many people agree with me, not everybody, of course, moral hazard is probably the least compelling and convincing reason, because it's not even a reality. It's just like a psychological assumption that if we do X, some people may react by doing Y, and we can't control that, so therefore we shouldn't do X. So I have to say, and if you're listening, Al, I'll say it to you, I'm extremely disappointed, and not that he's against it, that I knew, but the reason that he gave.
Yeah, I mean, what about the moral hazard of burning fossil fuels? What about the moral hazard of the International Maritime Organization taking sulfur out of shipping fuels because they want to reduce air pollution, meanwhile not realizing that they're going to cause a huge warming over the ocean, which has happened in the last 4 or 5 years as they tightened the restrictions on commercial shipping fuels. So it's I don't understand these things. So I guess I'm gonna give you some homework, I think. So I'd like you to figure out a way to try to do the same thing with Mr. Elon Musk.
Well, that may be a little more of a challenge, but now I guess I can say this. I did have some cordial conversations. Not recently, but many years ago, with Mr. Trump, who is, of course, very close to Mr. Musk. So maybe I need to play the Trump card. What do you think?
Yeah. So, you're leaving us in suspense. So tell us, I think you mentioned, I think you were about 29. You were both about the same age when you had these discussions. And what did you say, and how did he respond? And has he changed since then?
Well, since we're talking about climate, I will resist the urge to give you a complete answer and simply say that he has not changed at all, and I'll turn it back to you with regard to other climate issues.
Yes. Thank you. So we have another week here. Well, almost a full week for you, and a week. And are you going to change your strategy at all on the second week, apart from not going on any buses the wrong way, because you kind of know your way around a bit better now? So what do you want to do? I mean, I'm finding personally that the Cryosphere Pavilion is excellent. I love the talks in the Ocean Pavilion. I went to a talk in the United Nations Pavilion on climate, on technology and AI. You know, how we can use AI to address, to learn more and about modeling. And people talk about like a digital parallel. Like we have reality going on, and if we can model it all digitally with using AI assistance, we might, understand how the system's going to change. And the other thing that they talked about was cooperation between people. You know, how we can collaborate. And I asked the question, I said tariffs is the opposite to that, right? Putting tariffs on goods, that reduces cooperation between countries right at the time when we need more cooperation between countries to solve the climate issue. So I think, we'll maybe comment briefly on that. And then I think the UN is kicking us out because they want to close down and go home. And we have a holiday tomorrow, a break day. So maybe a couple minutes of discussion on that, and then I'll just conclude.
Okay. Well, first, when you talk about international cooperation, it reminds me one of the terms I came up with is the concept of bilateral negotiations between countries or industries. So I came up with the term climatelateralism, basically, where you'd have, and of course these agreements are happening all the time, agreements between a number of countries, a number of industries and so forth, that aren't worldwide, but that seems to be the future of climate progress, because the difficulty in reaching consensus with almost 200 countries, each of which have to approve every single word. In terms of the next week, what I'm most excited about is, and I've been asked to appear on a panel on Monday, and when people are seeing this, it will already have occurred. But it's a panel that's actually sponsored by the Ghana Meteorological Organization, and they're part of the World Meteorological Organization, the WMO. And there's a resolution that Ghana is going to be asking the WMO to consider that would basically begin to focus more on the triad, more on the three-legged stool. And we have meteorologists from Ghana, from Denmark, and myself representing HPAC. And so some folks that I've talked to think this may be a real opportunity to spread the word in a more official way. And we'll see how it goes, but that's what I'm excited about. And as you know, Paul, we've got a couple other programs that we'll be doing for the Climate Emergency Forum on climate engineering, and basically, looking at natural ways of cooling and so forth. So we're pretty excited about that as well. So I'm sure it'll be a busy week. And for me personally, maybe I'll get to the point where I can find my way around, and not spend half the time, sort of feeling like I'm backwards, or I might as well just be at home watching it on video.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. I guess Alex Carlin is right with his song that Africa is the solution, So good luck.
Are we supposed to break out in song now?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, he's a rock star, not me. So anyway, I want to, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. And I want to thank all our viewers of the Climate Emergency Forum. And I also would like to thank the International Society for Ecological Economics for basically allowing us to get all of the badges to attend the conference. Thanks to Heidi and Charles especially. We need to thank them more in these productions, because without them this wouldn't be happening at all. So thanks again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.
Heidi and Charles.
Yes. They're behind the camera. So thank you, everybody, and until next time. Okay, bye for now.